Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, November 25th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The political crisis involving the Jewish state law that is threatening to bring down Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has been put on hold here at home, but the dispute has become an international issue. Here with more is Eli Wogelanter.
Good evening. One coalition crisis has been delayed for now. The controversial Jewish state bill was postponed yesterday until next week, while representatives of the coalition parties are to meet in the upcoming days to draft a new version of the bill that they can all agree on. Meanwhile, Netanyahu continues to push for the bill's passage, saying today at a meeting with the Czech Prime Minister that recognition of Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people is the basis of any future peace accord.
We want a firm commitment from them that they will recognize the Jewish state, the nation-state of the Jewish people, just as they expect us to recognize the Palestinian state, the nation-state of the Palestinians. So far, they've been unwilling to do that, to end the conflict with Israel, to end their demands to flood Israel with Palestinians, to accept the idea that the Palestinian state is there to end the conflict with Israel rather than to continue. And secondly, we need, obviously, security arrangements on the ground to prevent the repetition of what happened when we left Lebanon to the last centimeter, when we left Gaza to the last centimeter, and these areas became launching grounds for violent attacks, including rocket attacks on our cities.
Hatzanuah leader Tzipi Livni, who is leading the fight against the bill in its current format, said the fight over the legislation is not over, that no compromise has been reached, it has just been postponed. Netanyahu said he was determined to pass the bill even without the support of his coalition partners. Coalition Chairman Zev Elkin, who sponsored one of the versions of the Jewish state bill, said Netanyahu does not want elections now, but he is not ready to accept the coalition partners' behavior as it has been. It was always a Likud that has had to compromise, he said. It won't be that way anymore. No one can threaten us with elections because it's those who threaten who are going down in the polls, not us. But Elkin acknowledged that the legislation lacks a majority in the Knesset, and therefore the only way to pass it would be to negotiate with Yesh Atid and Hatzanuah and draft a version they could support. Knesset members from across the spectrum spoke out on the bill, on what it is and what it isn't.
Facing a very serious attack on the identity of the state, we see that all the Arab Knesset members don't define themselves as Israelis but as Palestinians. We see that many countries don't justify anymore the basic existence of Israel, and the justification is the fact that we are a Jewish state.
The Israeli state can exist for the coming 100 years without this law. This law, unfortunately, strengthens the component of the Jewish side of the state on the expense of the democracy of the state. That will endanger, really, the very sensitive relationship between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority inside Israel.
We are not really doing any damage to the Israeli minorities. They will, of course, will keep the rights as a minority everywhere in every democratic state. The minorities, they have a right, of course, but they are not leading. We don't act according to the minorities. The state will act according to the majority, and the majority is the Jewish people. And it's a state that belongs not only to the people that are living here. I believe that also belongs to the whole Jewish people.
The U.S. State Department also weighed in on the discussion. State Department spokesman Jeff Rathke said the United States' position, which is unchanged, has been clear for years, that Israel is a Jewish and democratic state in which all citizens should enjoy equal rights.
This is the beginning of a process, so I don't want to speculate on the outcome. It would be our general view, though, that we would expect any final legislation to continue Israel's commitment to democratic principles.
Economy Minister Naftali Bennett did not take kindly to the State Department's comments, saying the U.S. has no right to interfere in internal Israeli affairs. I say to the Americans that Israel will manage the affairs of the State of Israel by ourselves. Netanyahu was asked at the start of the Likud faction meeting if the next election would be advanced. His answer, it will be clear in a matter of days. Laura?
Thank you, Eli. More countries will unilaterally recognize Palestine if the international community fails to advance a political solution to the Arab-Israel conflict. That's the view of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who spoke at the UN marking of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The Swedish foreign minister was in New York and claimed that her government's decision to recognize Palestine helped to advance peace prospects. But the Israeli ambassador sharply disagreed.
We, as the international community, must assume responsibility for what is a collective failure to advance a political solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Indeed, as we see around the world, governments and parliaments are taking action. That momentum will grow.
The Swedish recognition of the State of Palestine aims at making the parties less unequal and to improve the prospects for a negotiated final status agreement.
The Swedish government may host the Nobel Prize ceremony, but there's nothing noble about this cynical political campaign to appease the Arabs in order to get a seat at the Security Council. Nations on the Security Council should have sense, sensitivity, and sensibility. Well, the Swedish government has shown no sense, no sensitivity, and no sensibility. Just nonsense. State Secretary Söder may think she's here to celebrate their government's so-called historic recognition, when in reality it is nothing more than an historical mistake.
2 Jewish men were stabbed last night in the Old City during an apparent brawl with Arab youths. The 2 men, who study at the Shuvu Banim Yeshiva, told police they were attacked by a group of Arabs as they left the building. One of the victims, a 45-year-old man, suffered stab wounds to the abdomen, and the second victim, a 32-year-old male, suffered a broken hand and a shallow stab wound to the neck. Police arrested 3 Arab youths suspected of being involved in the incident. 25 days after being critically wounded by an Arab assassin at the Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem, Rabbi Glick left Shaarei Tzedek Hospital yesterday. The Temple Mount activist held an hour-long press conference, which he began with the prayer, "Blessed be he who raises from the dead." And he went on to thank the hospital staff and the police who killed the Islamic Jihad terrorist who tried to murder him. Glick recounted what the terrorist said right before he was shot, that he had to kill him because he is desecrating the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Glick, whose recovery was described by doctors as miraculous, said that the only ones desecrating Al-Aqsa and Islam are those that kill in the name of their religion. The November 24th deadline is come and gone, but once again talks to curb Iran's nuclear program have been extended. World powers have now set March of 2015 as the new deadline, with the aim of ironing out all the technical details by July. IBA's Margot Dudkevich reports on the latest round of talks in Vienna that failed to produce an agreement.
A decision by 6 Western powers to extend the talks for an additional 7 months with Iran came as no surprise. The United States, Britain, Russia, Germany, France and China, the P5+1 countries, said the new extension will allow them to reach a high-level political agreement with the Islamic Republic by March 1st. And ensure that all the technical details of the agreement are ironed out by July 1st. Western leaders said that the substantial progress had been made and no further sanctions imposed on Iran, who will continue to have access to $700 million a month in frozen assets until the final comprehensive agreement is drawn up. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest opposed imposing further sanctions on Tehran at this time, saying they would be counterproductive.
We do believe that enough progress has been made to warrant giving the Iranian regime more time to answer the international community's concerns about their nuclear program and to put in place a protocol for continuing to assure the international community about their compliance with these agreements.
Speaking to reporters yesterday, some of the officials involved in the talks sounded upbeat over the decision to extend them.
We intend to build on the current momentum in order to complete these negotiations within the shortest possible time, up to 4 months, and if necessary, to use the remaining time until the end of June to finalise any possible remaining technical and drafting work.
The Iranian foreign minister said he believes an agreement can be drawn up sooner than the 7-month period, but hinted that mutual mistrust between the sides was one of the major obstacles encountered during the Vienna talks.
all of us are insisting that we don't even need 7 months. And we believe we can do it much faster than that. The major obstacle was that there is a compounded mistrust, mutual.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani took a more positive approach. In an address to his nation, he said the sides have come much closer to clinching a deal. Any agreement has 2 stages, he said, negotiations behind the scenes and the stage when points discussed are put to paper. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier admitted that while some progress had been made, the Western powers did not get as far as they'd hoped. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned the talks are not going to get any easier.
These talks aren't going to suddenly get easier just because we extend them. They're tough. And they've been tough, and they're going to stay tough. We would be fools to walk away from a situation where the breakout time has already been expanded rather than narrowed, and where the world is safer because this program is in place.
The 6 world powers struck an interim deal with Iran last year known as the Geneva Accord, and succeeded in persuading Iran to curb some of its uranium enrichment in exchange for relief in sanctions. After failing to reach an agreement with Tehran in July to curb its nuclear activities, the sides agreed to extend the talks to this latest round in Vienna, which, like last time, failed to produce an agreement. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel resigned because he was being wrongly blamed for the Obama administration's foreign policy mistakes in the Middle East. That's the view of a prominent military analyst who says that Hagel wanted stronger action on the ground.
Secretary Hagel did not cause our problems in Iraq and Syria. It's important to remember that on a day when a lot of people are viewing him now as, you know, the blame guy, and maybe he's a little bit of the scapegoat as well. So it's a little bit unfair at this point to expect a Secretary of Defense to rescue us for a problem that began in many ways in the White House. And a lot of what Mr. Obama is going to have to do is reassess his own willingness to commit American capabilities and even perhaps limited numbers of American forces above and beyond the number in Iraq today.
A number of potential candidates are being suggested to replace Hagel. One of them is former Undersecretary of State Michelle Flournoy, who, if selected, would become the first woman to hold the top defense post. Staying in the United States, where thousands of people took to the streets in rallies across the nation to protest the grand jury decision not to indict a white officer in the controversial and racially charged shooting death of an unarmed black teenager. We get more from IBA's Aaron Viner.
Fires were set almost immediately after residents of Ferguson, Missouri, heard the announcement that no probable cause was found to indict Officer Darren Wilson for the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. The incident sparked weeks of often violent protests in the St. Louis suburb, inflamed tensions, and reignited debate over police, community, and race relations across America. It's all related to a 90-second altercation between a white policeman and a black teenager after he robbed a convenience store on August 9th. Wilson testified that Brown attacked him and was shot while trying to seize his weapon. Detractors say that the unarmed teenager was killed while trying to surrender. At least 30 rioters were arrested in Ferguson during flashes of overnight violence, including the burning of police cars in dozens of buildings, smashing storefront windows, and looting. Police and the National Guard responded with the firing of smoke canisters, tear gas, and pepper spray, and gunshots were heard in the streets. U.S. President Barack Obama acknowledged that the nation has much more work to do in improving race relations and issued an appeal for peaceful protest.
That won't be done by throwing bottles. That won't be done by smashing car windows. That won't be done by using this as an excuse to vandalize property, and it certainly won't be done by hurting anybody. To those in Ferguson, there are ways of channeling your concerns constructively, and there are ways of channeling your concerns destructively.
Demonstrations were held in many American cities, including Los Angeles.
I mean, obviously it's disappointing, but I didn't really anticipate any different outcome from it. And it's just, I mean, he was around my age, like I'm 17. And so it's possibility that I can be shot and killed and there would be like no justice to come from it?
I think she should be penalized for it, highly penalized for it. But this is America. I mean, we're only, 152 years away from the Emancipation Proclamation. So it shows that, we're not as far as we think we are.
New Yorkers hit Times Square to march, carry banners, and protest the decision, although reaction was a little more mixed.
I trust the system, and I believe that they had the facts, and they made their decision based upon that. So that's kind of how I see it.
Community leader Reverend Al Sharpton condemned the decision and vowed to continue the battle for civil rights. Activists were also emotionally charged in Chicago. Civil rights leader Jesse Jackson accused the state of protecting an executioner and demanded greater action.
People of conscience must rise up and fight back, demanding an urban policy. I would say lastly, ministers gathered here tonight, we want the Department of Justice to intervene.
A federal probe into the shooting is ongoing, and U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder stressed in a statement that the Justice Department investigators have not yet reached any conclusions. In the meantime, tensions between America's black and white communities continue to boil. This is Erin Viner for IBA News.
Women are not equal to men. That's the view of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who told a meeting in Istanbul on the status of women that feminists failed to understand the special status that Islam attributes to mothers. He said that women and men cannot be placed on an equal footing because they are created differently. Women's rights activists blasted the comments and accused Erdogan of being in violation of the Turkish constitution, Turkish law, and international conventions on gender equality. They also blamed Erdogan with failure to stem the rise of violence against women in Turkey. Today marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. According to surveys, 35% of women and girls globally experience some form of physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetimes. IBA's Erin Viner spoke about the situation for women here in Israel with Vered Persweed, who is the Director General of the Authority for the Advancement of the Status of Women at the Prime Minister's office.
I think that Israel in good situation when we compare it to the other states in the world, especially to our neighbors, the close neighbors and the far neighbors. We know what happened in Iran, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Syria. But I think that they are not our model. And we have a lot of progress in the last years. We have less women that are suffer from violence, but my vision that no one woman will suffer from any kind of violence. It could be violence, economic violence, when the husband tell her, keep the money on my bank and don't spend it. And when the husband sometimes tell her what to do and what to clothes to put and what makeup to put, it's kind of violence. And in the extreme, we have a husband that killed their wife. This year, 9 women killed. It's less than the last year. The last year, it's about 14 women that killed by their husband or ex-husband. And most of the killing women belong to special group.
The victims?
Yes, the victims. Third of them belong to the Arab society. And we ask not to say the word killing about the honor of the family. It's not issue of honor. It's proper violence. And we ask for the journalists and for the police not to use this issue, okay? And the other third of the women belong to the new immigrants that come from some of them, the countries that belong to Russia areas, and in the last years before to Ethiopia areas. And we have special projects to all this population. And I think that in this year we see less cases in violence, even in sex violence issues, because the judge give more high punishment. And we have a lot of work about awareness that begin in the kindergarten and in the school. And so we have special campaign that call to men to come and get advice when they are thinking about divorce and they don't know how to end the conflict. We have with the another ministry of the welfare ministry emergency line that its number is 118, and all the time there are professional workers, social worker and psychologists that answer in all the languages, Hebrew, English, Russian, French, Arabic all the days, 24 hours, and even in Shabbat. And they can get advice, and after they can come to talk with men, social worker, in private, or if they want in a group. And I think that it helps.
That's very encouraging to hear that the numbers are actually going down. But recently another case made headlines when a female judge reportedly was raped and she refused to file a complaint with the police. What kind of a message is this sending to other rape victims?
I think that it's not a good message, but I can understand there. I myself suffer from rape and I complain. And it was very difficult how the society reacts to me, okay? In the internet, people write my name, and I'm a mother. And when my children go to school, the teacher asks them, you need any help? What happened to your mother? I was very famous in very high position when it's happened to me. And I know that it's very difficult, but I ask for her and I beg for her to complain, because we give price to attack. It will continue to attack more women. We know that it's never one time, okay? But every time when we keep our secret, we help to the terrorist to continue his act against women.
I absolutely agree, and I applaud your courage. It was a good lesson for your daughter and for all women in the country. Farid Sweet, thank you very much, and good luck with your efforts.
Thank you very much.
In Premier Soccer League action, Ironi Kiryat Shmona are 5 points clear at the top of the table after a 2-1 win over defending champions Maccabi Tel Aviv last night in Kiryat Shmona. The hosts took the lead after only 45 seconds of play with a header from Rajas Kola and never looked back. 80 minutes later, Roy Kehat kicked in the second goal for Kiryat Shmona, which had the lead but did not get the better of play on the field. It was too little too late when a penalty kick from Eran Zahavi in the last minute narrowed the gap to 2-1. Kiryat Shmona has had 7 wins and 2 draws in its 9 games. Maccabi dropped to 3rd place. Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the weather, and temperatures will continue to be colder than normal for the season. Heavy rain accompanied by hail and thunder is predicted. Snow is expected on Mount Hermon. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. And that's all for this newscast. Please join us again tomorrow at the same time when we'll be back with all the latest news from Israel. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.